Hey. Looks like we just went live. I thought we went live a little sooner. Hello and happy Monday. I'm gonna have the comments open so I know you guys are in here. So for today, first of all, I've had like a really crazy week. I don't know if anyone else had a crazy week, but I am just catching up on things. Putting out content. Make sure you're following me on Instagram. If you aren't, Instagram is Jazmen Jafar. It's literally the Princess Jasmine. If we could get that thrown up on screen. There we go. So yeah, follow me on IG. Best place to follow me is obviously OnlyFans or Snapchat, but if you just want somewhere free, IG is the spot. And YouTube. No more delays. I'm going to be filming tomorrow. And then once I have the setup and everything, then I'll be putting out content every week. It's always hard to get that first, like the setup and everything done first. And then once that's good to go, I think I'll be able to push out content like much easier without having to worry about, oh, I need a mic. Oh, I need a memory card. All this stuff that I don't know much about. You're loving my OnlyFans? Thank you. So today's topic is free speech and obscenity, the obscenity doctrine. Yes, follow me on YouTube, Jazmen Jafar. It's also in my Instagram link. So that link I have on my Instagram and on my Reddit and everywhere is the link that has all my socials on it. Hi. So this was something that a couple of you messaged me about, and you guys wanted me to talk about free speech, First Amendment, and give you an overview. And I didn't have as much time to prepare as I wanted to, but like in the last 30 minutes, I was like so stupid. I was just like, oh, I'm just going to give them a free speech rundown. And I opened up my notes because the First Amendment, I mean, I took con law and everything, but I took a specific First Amendment free speech class, like my last semester of law school. And I opened up the notes for it. So I'm going to be reading off of that because I have a lot of case briefs on it. But I was like, there's no way you can do this a whole semester in like an hour. Because I was first going to go through like all the exceptions and like clear and present danger test, Brandenburg, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, okay, we can't do that. So I was like, why don't we just talk about one like unprotected category that's pertinent to what I do, obscenity and pornography. And also there's just a lot of talk now that Elon Musk took over Twitter. I kind of mentioned this in the end of last week's podcast where people are saying, okay, so if we make Twitter the new public forum, you can't be, banning people because they're misgendering people or whatever. But technically, you can ban pornography because pornography falls under the obscenity doctrine, and obscenity is not protected by free speech. So this is a very unclear area of the law right now because the internet. So you're going to see a lot of the cases that I'm going to be talking about. First of all, the obscenity doctrine is all over the place. I remember my professor, and I have some notes that I was like quickly looking at. My notes are so funny, the things the professor said or I said that are like, what the fuck are the courts doing? And yeah, it was already a very like, because you can't really define obscenity. Famously, one of the justices, I forgot which one in which case, we might look at it, said, you know it when you see it. Well, as a legal, that's a very hard and difficult legal test. We want things as clear in law as possible. So for obscenity, the courts have had a very difficult time trying to define what obscenity is, when it's protected, when it's not protected. So pornography isn't not protected, but obscenity is not protected. So what pornography counts as obscene, what doesn't? These are kind of things we're going to talk about. If you guys want me to start doing these on other free speech exceptions, clear and present danger, hate speech is one that's kind of a hot topic right now. Libel, all this defamation, all of that. With the Alex Jones case, we can do little episodes of that if you guys want more on my lawyer side. But today I thought we would do obscenity. Like I said, this has always been a very unclear, like you'll see some of these cases, they don't make sense, like they contradict each other. The justices haven't really known what they've been doing with this. And now with the onset of the internet, that changes a lot because that wasn't around when a lot of these, I mean, the Miller test is controlling law right now. We're going to talk about that. But pornography, the internet, OnlyFans, none of this stuff was around when most of these decisions were heard. And there's only like one case, at least, I think, that we went over in class that talks about the internet a little bit. Now, Stanley v. Georgia is a case where you can watch whatever you want and you're allowed to possess pornography. I think they literally said what a person consumes in their own home is not the business of the government, but there's still regulations on distributing, creating, what forums it should be allowed in and stuff. So yeah, with Twitter and what's going on now, if Twitter is to be treated like a public forum, obscenity isn't protected. So would my nudes have to be wiped off Twitter? You know, and this is stuff that's very unclear, but I mean, I think common sense is no. But you know, social media platforms will always have to set limits to what speech they allow in their terms of service. They make money selling advertising. Companies are weary on buying ad space. Yeah. This, I'm not talking about that. I was talking about something that I said last week. I don't know if you heard, where I was saying that there's an argument to treat social media platforms at like the government come in and be like, I know you're a private company, but because of the power that, like, you know, the public forum is supposed to be the place that has the highest protection for free speech, and nobody's going to like your local downtown square anymore and talking about their opinions, right? That's happening on Twitter. So the argument is, if the government comes in and they say, fuck your ads, you guys aren't allowed to do viewpoint discrimination here. You aren't allowed to ban people for, like, you know, like Trump or whoever for saying something you don't agree with, which Twitter has gotten a lot of heat for, which is one of the reasons this whole Elon thing is happening, to treat it with the same free speech protections as that, like that's federally applied. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. As it stands, these social media platforms are allowed to do, they can ban things that are far more restrictive than what our actual free speech rights are. That's what they do anyway, right? You're allowed to go on the street and say that vaccines give you cancer, but Mark Zuckerberg is allowed to ban you for saying that off his platform. This is just an argument saying, for some people say this, that they're trying to argue that Mark Zuckerberg shouldn't be able to do that because the new public forum are these social media companies. Now that's a discussion for a different day. So obscenity. Okay, I'm gonna have to be reading off of these notes that I took in law school because I didn't have time to, you know, get them all organized for this. But one thing that we really, the umbrella that we're looking at everything under is why do we have the First Amendment? What is the First Amendment trying to protect? And at the highest level, the thing that requires the most protection of them is democracy. So protecting democracy, protecting people's right to vote and elect their leaders. And let me write it down. Okay, yeah. Government needs to be responsive to the will of the people. So anything that's trying to protect, that is the most central value that free speech is trying to protect. The second most important value is the marketplace of ideas. People should be able to find the truth. The most effective way to find the truth is to be able to hear everybody's opinions, to be able to hear what everybody has to say. That is the best way that people can arrive to the truth, or the most compelling arguments, the most compelling reasoning, and come to their own conclusions. Lastly, self-expression and individual autonomy. So those are the three main values that free speech is put in place to protect. Another big distinction that the courts look at is content-based restriction versus content-neutral restrictions, which is time, place, and manner restrictions. So content-based restrictions are the kinds of restrictions that give rise to strict scrutiny. Now, strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and rational basis, these are all huge. These are like all you do in law school is, what is the court applying strict scrutiny or is it applying rational basis? Because that usually, most of the time, if a court is applying strict scrutiny, the law that's being challenged gets struck down. because strict scrutiny, the standard is, it has to be a compelling government interest that's narrowly tailored and has no less restrictive means. So most of the time, if the court is looking at the constitutionality of a law that a state has put in place and they're looking at it with strict scrutiny, it'll get shut down. Rational basis review, on the other hand, is pretty like, as long as they have any basis, as long as they have any reason for doing it, then, and they're not like super restricting people, like it's a much easier, and we'll look at some cases and we'll talk about what kind of scrutiny is being applied, and that usually will almost certainly affect the outcome of a case. There's only a few cases that I remember ever where this wasn't the case. But yeah, content-based restrictions is basically viewpoint discrimination. Is saying, based on the message that you're sending with this speech, we are restricting you based on the content of what's being said. The courts don't like that. They will almost usually always shut it down. But we'll look at obscenity, and there's a few times where we're like, oh, this seems pretty content-based, but they won't admit it. Or they do this weird thing in obscenity where they look at secondary effects, which we'll look at. But I feel like a professor, guys. This is so weird. I feel like I'm not a good professor. But so then content neutral restriction is just time, place, and manner. So that it doesn't matter what's being said. They might put a restriction based on, okay, you can protest. All protests are allowed, but they're not allowed at 3 a.m. That is a content neutral restriction, because it doesn't matter if you're protesting for your support for Nazis, or it doesn't matter if you're protesting for your support for BLM, whatever it is, you guys can't do it at 3 a.m. That is a content neutral restriction. If they said, well, if you're doing a MAGA protest, you can't do it after 7 p.m., but all other protests are allowed, that is obviously a content-based restriction. Any questions so far? Sorry if I'm being very, I don't know if I can teach a law class in a Twitch stream, but maybe when I get into the obscenity stuff and actually going into some of these cases, I should have had a way to share my screen, but I don't think I can do that unless someone can figure it out. But all right, so obscenity. Obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment. There are certain things that are not protected by the First Amendment. We talked about some of them, and if you guys want to, we can do some other streams on some other ones, but we'll see how this one goes. So basically, and I tried to make this distinction earlier, obscenity doesn't always mean pornography, but a lot of times, especially when it comes to hardcore pornography, they're pretty synonymous. And the way obscenity is defined, like I said, is not very clear. It is very much like, you know it when you see it, but not really. Let me make sure I can still see the comments. Oh, no. So sexy, you being nerdalicious on court procedure. All right, I'll take it. So, also child pornography. So obscenity and child pornography we'll talk about briefly, but it is literally not protected at all. It's not even protected under Stanley. So you can't even possess it. You can't have it. It goes farther than the Miller Doctrine, which is our controlling doctrine on obscenity in general. I think none of us really have issue with child pornography being not protected speech. Let me know if you disagree, but most of us don't. So the kind of overarching rationale for obscenity not being protected is basically because it is of such slight social value as a step to truth that any benefit that may be derived from it is outweighed by the social interest in order and morality. So basically, the overarching opinion is that speech, we're here to protect democracy, marketplace of ideas, expression. Pornography or obscene materials don't really do that. They don't have much value. They don't have value in any of it doesn't really, it's not saying a viewpoint. It's not making an argument. It's not really artistic. It has no literary value. It's just there to be obscene. And the courts, are very like, oh, we don't like that. And so it doesn't have much that's worth protecting. It's kind of what it said, what the courts have said. Now, even speech that isn't obscene, so the court has wrestled with the question whether pornography that isn't obscene that is protected should be protected at a low, like it's lower valued speech. So just like nudity, should you be allowed, like in a lot of these cases, we'll talk about movies that just show like nude sex scenes. Okay, that's protected because it's art, it's part of a movie, it's telling a story, but that speech is lower, has a lower level of protection than other kinds of speech. And this isn't hardcore in legal jurisprudence, but it's definitely wrestled with a lot. Can only imagine the Supreme Court having to go through hours of porn. This is really funny. Hours of Pornhub to individually decide will be considered obscene or not. So like I said, Pornhub is after a lot of these cases, but even hearing some, like just imagining some of these justices going through and being like, is this obscene? And you guys will see, they'll talk about the prurient interest. Basically means, does this material like, does this create a prurient interest in people? Which basically means, does it make you horny? Is it literally, does it have any value other than to make you horny? That's kind of what they're looking at. If it's just there to make you horny, then it's obscene and it has no place in our free speech protection world. But it is funny to think about these old white dudes from like, a century ago trying to determine what is and isn't free speech and what should be. There's presentation mode, but best not to get. So yeah, okay. So there is a way to share my screen, but like I'm not gonna try to figure it out now. So maybe next time, if you guys want more of this kind of content, which is gonna require me to look at my old law notes. So Miller is the controlling case right now, but a couple cases on how we got there. So there was Roth v. United States. This was 1957, and this was regarding a federal obscenity statute which prohibited the mailing of every obscene, lewd, filthy book, pamphlet, picture, paper, letter, writing, print, or other publication of indecent character. So Roth, the defendant, operated a book-selling business in New York and was prosecuted under this statute after mailing out obscene pamphlets. So the issue before the court is whether a federal statute prohibiting this kind of obscenity violates the First Amendment. The court said, no, we already know that. Obscenity is not protected. They talked about how historic. So one of the things that courts really look at is historical. Has this been historically prohibited by states? Like trying to maintain the status quo, which I don't think is a good way to look at anything, which is kind of the issue that a lot of us are having with the new Dobbs, right, that came out of Roe v. Wade, the new Dobbs doctrine, right? When they're like, oh, you only have a right to privacy if it's deeply rooted in the nation's tradition or whatever is the new test. That is a terrible, terrible, terrible test, right? Look at our nation's history and jurisprudence. Things like interracial marriage are not deeply rooted. And so when Dobbs threw out all of the right, the substantive due process, basically, which I don't want to get into with you guys because I don't want to confuse you guys even more. When Dobbs threw out substantive due process, which had the right to privacy, had the right to contraception, had all those rights that they're saying are embedded in the Constitution, even though they're not outright in there. Like there's nowhere in the Constitution that says you have a right to marry, right? That was brought about through developing this doctrine. And now the new test is, well, it has to be deeply rooted in our nation's history. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like that. Our nation's history has changed for the better, and I don't want the courts having to look at, well, historically, we're shitty to Black people and gay people, so I guess they're not protected now. sorry. This is more a monologue than a conversation, right? I'm trying to figure out. No, you guys are allowed to say things, but I'm just trying to put out. This is my first time trying to give you guys legal information or like go through like legal knowledge. And so it's kind of difficult for me because I'm not a law professor and you guys are not in law school. So you guys are, I do have discussion points in here that I want to like talk about when I get there. But, oh shit. But I don't, it is a lot of me just going through these cases at the same time. If you guys want to say things, I'm literally looking at the comments on the side. So basically that case said the First Amendment protects ideas with even the slightest amount of redeeming social value. For example, even ideas about sex are protected under the amendment because sex by itself does not equal obscenity. This speech is only obscene and thus out of the protection of the First Amendment if it deals with sex in a manner appealing to the prurient interest. That is the main thing, which basically, I mean, let's look up prurient because I want to know what the actual definition is because it's still very having or encouraging an excessive interest in sexual matters. Basically, does it make you just horny? Like I said. Anything else? That's what they're talking about. So if that's it, if it's just a picture of a fucking pussy, then that's probably obscene because it doesn't have any redeeming social value, according to Justice Brennan. So that was that case. Now, in these early cases, Justice Douglas was dissenting on a lot of this, and I love his dissents. He was the MVP. And so then the second case, so he dissented in this. I'll read his next dissent. I won't read this one. Like I don't have the whole dissent. These are just Quimby briefs that I used to copy and paste into my notes because I didn't want to read the actual case because I was lazy by the end of my law school career. So the next case, this was 1957, Alberts v. California. So Alberts, the defendant, was convicted under a California obscenity statute for lewdly keeping for sale obscene and indecent books and publishing an obscene advertisement of them. So I think this guy was like a bookstore owner and there was a obscene book. So yeah, as you guys see, these are not internet cases. This is when was this? Like 1950 something. These are all about bookstores and stuff. So very different than the internet. And that's why we haven't had a lot of cases recently, I don't think, because I took this class literally 2021 and these are the cases we looked at. Now, this is all before Miller, this is leading up to Miller, but bookstores and the internet are very different. Yeah, I don't agree. Like, I have a lot of issues with the court's decision in a lot of these. So again, the court said, no, that statute doesn't violate the First Amendment because obscenity is not protected. Speech must have at least a slight amount of redeeming social value to be protected by the First Amendment. Let's also remember that didn't think change in the U.S. because of Larry Flynt. I know controlling law is still Miller. So unless Larry Flynt, let me look that up really quick because just in case you're right, although I doubt you are. The obscenity doctrine hasn't changed. So, are you talking about Hustlers magazine? No, you're talking about something else. You're not talking about this necessarily. That might be so we're still under the Miller doctrine, but there are certain cases like Stanley, et cetera, that are talking about different things, not necessarily obscenity. But I'm still back. This is even before Miller. We're not in 1988 yet. But basically, again, has to have redeeming social value, even though the court now says money is speech, but I guess pornography isn't. So they do emphasize the sex on its own. It doesn't equal obscenity. Obscenity involves sex that appeals to the prurient interest. We talked about, does it make you horny? Now they started developing the Miller test in this case. The test they had here was the prevailing test for determining whether material is obscene is whether to the average person applying contemporary community standards, the dominant theme of the material taken as a whole appeals to the period interest. So one thing they really did here is contemporary community standards. So this is saying that maybe this is not obscene in Las Vegas, but this is obscene in rural Alabama. So another reason that the internet kind of because this is still relevant in Miller, and the internet, it's like, I mean, whether you're in Alabama or you're in Las Vegas, Pornhub is Pornhub. So that's one thing to think about. But back in this day, that wasn't a problem. So it's still a very vague test whether the average person applying contemporary community standards, the dominant theme of the material taken as a whole, it's very subjective, right? It's like, you just put a jury, I guess maybe 12 jurors from Alabama may not see things like 12 jurors from Las Vegas. What's considered obscene would change depending on where you are. Are we not allowed to say pornography? Is that why you keep saying pornography? I don't know. So Justice Douglas, I really like his dissent here. This is a little summary of it. In sustaining the conviction, the majority is adopting a standard where the legality of a publication is judged by the purity of thoughts it instills in its readers. The standard goes against the nature of the requirements of the First Amendment. Whether material is protected under the freedoms of speech and press should not be determined by balancing the individual's interest in freedom of expression against the court's judgment that a particular form of expression has no redeeming social importance. The public should have the opportunity to accept or reject ideas according to its own perception of whether obscenity exists. Hear, hear. So I agree with that, but that was Douglas. Then 1973, we have Miller. This is current law. Nothing unless it has come out in the last year and I haven't been in law school and I missed something huge. This is controlling law. So this again was about advertising the sale of obscene books through mass mailing. So I guess he was mailing, from what I remember and what the facts say, he was mailing these to unwilling recipients, like advertisements for these books that contained obscene material. I don't know what they were. I don't know if we would consider them obscene now in 2022, but at the time, that is what people it was very obscene to them. So what the court said is that is the law protected, because he obviously got in trouble because he broke the law. And the court said the law is constitutional. And there we have the Miller test. So basically, the court talks about how a state offense must also be limited to works when taken as a whole, appeal to the period interest in sex, portray sexual content in a patently offensive way, and taken as a whole do not have serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. In determining whether the material in question meets the standard, the trier of fact must consider 3 guiding principles. Are we ready for the Miller test, guys? Whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the period interest. So we got that from the prior case. 2, whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law. So this is kind of depends on the law, but basically the courts were trying to make sure that the laws were narrowly tailored and weren't overbroad. So that the law would only prohibit actual obscenity and not stuff that fell outside of that. And 3, whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. That is the Miller test. So do you guys have, what's your thoughts on that? Again, Douglas dissented and Brennan dissented in that. So one distinction in this case that the professor point out is that this content is just being mailed to random people. So it's not people that log on to Pornhub or they ask for it. And I think that but they didn't really talk about that as being a rationale in this case. They do kind of talk about it in future cases. And then 2, it's kind of trying to tell us what obscenity is, but it's still not very clear. I wrote obscenity is hardcore porn in my notes because I think that's what it's basically saying. If it's just hardcore porn, I think it would fall under the obscenity doctrine. Let me see comment really fast. Okay, no questions. The obscenity was not targeting the market. Yeah, that's a good thing to note. But they didn't really talk about that at least in the little Quimby part I took out. And Quimby usually takes out anything important. If you're going to law school, I can't stress enough, get Quimby. Get your first year, maybe read some cases so you know how, and then after that, Quimby. All right, so now we have, this is 1973, and this is Paris Adult Theater versus Slayton. I don't know. But basically, Paris Adult Theater owned and operated an adult movie theater in Atlanta. And this theater was showing 2 obscene films depicting sexual acts and nudity. So they were convicted by the Georgia Supreme Court for violating state obscenity laws. The actual law is not written in my notes. But basically, the issue whether states may regulate commerce in obscene material and exhibition of that material in places of public accommodation. Yes, under the 14th Amendment, states have the power to make their own laws to prohibit obscenity. Thus, states may prohibit pornographic films if the films are deemed to be obscene, even if they are exhibited for consenting adults only. I don't like this case. States have a legitimate interest in regulating material for all audiences in local commerce and in all places of public accommodation, subject only to constitutional limits. In particular, states have an interest in the quality of public life and the total community environment. So now they're starting to talk about, okay, this film has some maybe obscene stuff in it, maybe not. But even if it's not totally obscene, we have to look at the effects on, society here. Market value could go down around this if like the properties around this, if it's just showing obscene material. So there was a congressional report in this case actually notes the existence of a link between obscene material and crime. This has been debunked. There's no link between hardcore pornography and crime. In fact, the inverse has been found on some. We talked about this on the pornography stream, if you guys remember. But that is kind of what they used to uphold this. So they basically applied strict scrutiny to this case, which they shouldn't have. Brennan dissented. This is what he said. The case represents the difficulty with reconciling state interests and preventing obscenity with individuals' interests in involving protected First Amendment speech. Obscenity law jurisprudence has been unstable since the decision in Roth. And so basically he was saying they need to rework obscenity, which I think is very fucking obvious. Douglas also dissented. Justice Brennan is correct to seek a new path in what we consider obscenity because it's just so vague. Wouldn't have guessed it gets this specific. Yeah, okay, so Hazard Stint never knew much about obscenity laws, wouldn't have guessed it gets that specific, but the need for distinctions is important, all things considered. Yeah, and the way the courts have done a really bad job with obscenity. So here, this was not thrusted into the public. You chose to go see this movie. So why are they applying such strict scrutiny to it? Why are they not strict scrutiny, they're applying rational basis to it. So they're saying, oh, well, rational basis is saying, okay, well, they have an interest in just making the community more moral. So that's kind of what they applied to it, even though it wasn't necessarily obscene. And they talked about that. So, and what is really the justification for saying obscenity is categorically excluded? So I guess really what the justices are thinking is, on one side, there may be this big harm to society, this big harm to our morals, this big harm to maybe safety. And on the other side, there isn't a lot of value in it. So that's kind of what the courts were doing with this when it came to obscenity, and also stuff that isn't necessarily obscene. They're applying this rational basis review. I'm sorry I said strict scrutiny either. I was thinking about it inversed in my head, but it's rational basis review. They're saying, well, they have an interest. It's not the least restrictive means of achieving their compelling. It's not a compelling interest. It's just an interest, and it's not the least restrictive means of achieving it. However, you know, this stuff isn't that important to speech, and you know, it could have all these harms. And so that's kind of what the court did here, which I really don't like. Next, this is 1986, and this is another book case. This is so funny how there's so many book cases. But here's one where the court actually did apply strict scrutiny, because the court considered this viewpoint-based discrimination and content-based discrimination. So this is about a city in Indianapolis that had an ordinance prohibiting pornography, but it defined pornography as a practice that discriminates against women, specifically in a violent or sexually explicit manner. And so American booksellers challenged it, and then the courts looked at it, and what the court said was, it's content-based discrimination because it's talking about women and showing women in a subordinate position. So it's targeting a certain kind of explicit material based on the content in it and the views in it. So here's what they said. The Indianapolis Ordinance defined pornography in a manner that did not implicate any aspect of the definition of obscenity, so it doesn't fall under that. For example, the ordinance does not refer to the prurient interest, to offensiveness, or to the standards of the community. This fact justifies treating pornography as defined in the ordinance as a separate category of speech from obscenity. The ordinance ultimately discriminates based on the content of the speech by advocating an approved way to view women, how they react to sexual encounters, and how sexes may relate to each other. Speech treating women in the approved way is lawful, no matter how sexually explicit, while speech treating women in the disapproved way, as submissive or whatever, is unlawful regardless of its potential social value. So that's what they're saying the ordinance is saying, which makes it unconstitutional. This constitutes viewpoint discrimination that is unconstitutional under the First Amendment. Under the First Amendment, the government must permit people to evaluate all ideas for themselves and may not restrict expression simply because of its message. So they said this had a message in it. The ordinance was prohibiting a message as opposed to the fact that the content does nothing but make you horny. Does that make sense? Or am I losing you guys? Let me know. I have to remember you guys aren't. Well, this might be boring for most of you. So now we're getting into the realm of protected speech, kind of like, okay, it's not obscenity or the statute isn't. So one thing with this case, I'm learning as much as listening. Okay, cool. I'm glad somebody's learning. So now we're getting into the category of speech that isn't. And one thing that the case before really tries to emphasize is that these laws need to only target obscenity. They can't target, like in the Indianapolis one, any content that depicts women in a sexually explicit or humiliating way. That is not allowed. And here's another case where the content isn't prohibited because it's not necessarily obscene, but this is exactly what I was talking about, where the courts have basically put sexually explicit content that isn't obscene as a type of lower valued speech, and they allow a lot of regulations and zoning and other types of restrictions around it for that reason. And here's an example of that. So this is I don't know how to say his name, Erzonic versus Jacksonville. This was 1975. This was about a drive-in theater that was depicting nudity at the drive-in theater, with the theater or the screens being visible from the road. So if you were driving and you were driving by this theater, you could potentially see some nudity. And that was the issue. So the issue before the court is is censorship of protected speech valid where the message is so invasive that an unwilling individual could not avoid it? And that was kind of the thing before the court. It's like, okay, well, now you could just be driving by with your family and you could see like somebody's titties, you know, if you're like, let's say it was showing Game of Thrones, you could see somebody's titties and you were an unwilling participant in that. And so the court said, yeah, you can. In the interest of protecting individual privacy, a city may impose a reasonable time, place, manner regulation on speech as long as it is content neutral. So they're saying this is content neutral. And there's this in a couple of cases where even the professor and we're like, this is not content neutral. This is definitely content based, but the courts are interpreting it as content neutral. So it says a city may not, however, target certain types of speech that it deems more offensive than others, although a narrow exception exists where speech invades an unwilling viewer's privacy to such a degree that the speech cannot be avoided. Here, Jacksonville has deemed nudity to be offensive speech and has targeted such speech with its ordinance, prohibiting the showing of nudity in theaters where screens are visible from the public streets. So here's an example of material that isn't obscene, but they're applying rational basis review to it. And they're like, but we don't want random people to see it if they don't want to see it. So they can regulate this. They can't prohibit it, but they can regulate it. What are your guys' thoughts on this? No? You guys don't have thoughts? I feel like the teacher that would always be like, what do you guys think? And everyone would raise their hand. My notes under this are so scattered. Remember medium, this is what I wrote. Remember medium matters / urinal art. I don't know what that means. And then I wrote, remember hardcore / not like celebrity butt. Also, then we went into the actual facts. Violent porn does not cause any harm to women, doesn't increase crime to women. However, extreme violence, it's not the explicitness of sex, but violence, and it affects a very small amount of men. We talked about this, men that are already have already imprisoned to do these crimes or have went to jail. A lot of them did say that kind of material, they consume that kind of material. But this means, and my professor said this means you should probably be regulating like slasher films because the violence extreme violence tied to violence versus hardcore pornography to violence is actually more established. But nobody has been talking about regulating slasher films. I don't think it's overreach if it can be seen in public space. I actually agree with that. I don't have an issue with this case. What time is it? Okay. Yeah, so basically the big picture I took from that class, this was all one class. If you guys want to know how much shit we have to do in one class in law school, this was all one class. How about sexually explicit material that's not obscene? Well, they will find a way to regulate it, but not make it a categorical exclusion. It's lower value speech. Basically the theme of that. Then the next class, we did like 2 classes on this. So let's go through these cases. This is, okay, so the other case, a lot of you agree with, or one of you, like a lot of you, but here is a case that I don't agree with, and this one will really be obscenity can be found more, I'm reading a comment. Obscenity can be found more easily if sought compared to the 90s. Yeah, what's considered obscene in the 90s would probably not be considered obscene today. So I guess it would depend on the, community standards, but the community standards these days are also because of the internet. Are there community standards anymore with the internet? Like Pornhub is Pornhub. It doesn't matter. I have fans from all over the world that are watching my obscene content. So what are the community standards these days? That is an interesting question. So this is Young v. American Mini Theater. This is another theater case where the city of Detroit adopted 2 zoning ordinances that required adult movie theaters to be sufficiently dispersed throughout the city. Specifically, an adult movie theater could not be located within 1,000 feet of any 2 other regulated uses or within 500 feet of a residential area. So this was basically about them saying you can only put this kind of content. It's not obscene, so it's protected, but we're regulating it so that you can only put it in certain areas. I mean, it's there, but it's its own digital version of a bookstore and not in places where it's not wanted. I don't know what you're talking about. So here, the court actually admitted its content-based regulation. So it says, despite this content-based regulation, it's unlikely that the Detroit ordinance would have a significant deterrent effect on the exhibition of films protected by the First Amendment. If doubt exists over the type of sexual activity prohibited by the ordinances, any ambiguity can be successfully resolved. I shouldn't have read that part. I don't want to confuse you guys. Additionally, the Detroit ordinance does not prohibit adult films, but merely requires movie theaters showing these films to be dispersed evenly throughout the city. So they're considering this they're admitting that this is a content-based regulation, but they're saying, this is what they're saying, the zoning ordinances were passed as part of a citywide commercial planning effort and were thus enacted for a legitimate purpose. The ordinances also serve the legitimate purpose of preserving the character of Detroit neighborhoods and the quality of urban life. So this is the secondary effects thing I was saying. So very, very, very loose rational race basis review where they say as long as you have any interest in regulating this, the neighborhood, the blah, 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 whatever, it's fine. So you can really tell the courts, obviously obscenity, I guess, is out. But then even like anything sexually explicit, they are very like, they don't really want to protect it. They're just very like, we're not going to ban it. Obviously, you can consume it in your own home, but we're going to allow states to heavily regulate this material, even when it is content-based, which is kind of really, it contradicts the court's entire free speech doctrine in a way. It's a very weird, obscenity is a very weird part of the free speech jurisprudence. So Stewart descended. The majority's opinion vastly departs from the court's prior First Amendment jurisprudence. The fact that the type of movies shown by the theaters in question may be objectionable to some people is not sufficient to find it unprotected by the First Amendment. The majority's decision violates the purpose of the First Amendment by permitting selective interference with protected speech believed to produce distasteful effects. This is completely in opposition to the First Amendment's requirement that time, place, and manner restrictions on speech be content neutral. Literally. I mean, if you look at this case and you were actually applying the proper doctrine to it, this is they should not be applying rational basis review to this. They should be applying strict scrutiny to this, right? So they kind of just said, well, courts do that a lot. So yeah, you can't ban it, but you can zone it because this is lower value speech. And the line my professor uses, like, the justices are probably thinking, we didn't send our sons off to war to protect this. This isn't what America is about. This isn't what we have fought for. This isn't the kind of speech that we have, sent our sons off to war to fight for. So no, we're not going to treat it like it is. So the secondary effects is like, oh, it's not that people who watch these films go do bad things. It's not that there's any interest in that. It's not that it's being shown to people that don't want it to be seen. You literally go into the theater, it's enclosed to see this. But it just so happens that maybe property values could go down, the sanctity of the city could go down, like whatever, the neighborhood, whatever can go down, reputation, like these are the kind of things that the court was like, that's a legitimate interest, and they didn't balance that at all because, like I said, they consider this lower valued speech without explicitly saying it. So this case I did not like. Neither did my professor. I think it's pretty clear that this was not the right decision. But I think what happens a lot of the time with courts is they have an answer. They're like, okay, zoning makes sense, like this, and so they try to justify it legally, even though technically it violates their own jurisprudence. So there's that. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns. So, oh my god, why is my thing not working? There we go. Here's the second one. So this one, a lot of you guys are probably going to say, okay, this one makes more sense. So this is another zoning regulation that prohibited adult motion picture theaters from being located within 1,000 feet of any residential zone, church, park, or school. Theaters were defined as adult if they distributed media depicting, describing, or relating to specified sexual activities or specified anatomical areas for observation by patrons. So Playtime Theaters was an adult theater that challenged this, and the court said, dun, 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 they said that it's fine. It says it does not ban adult theaters, but rather provides that adult theaters cannot be located within, like, by a school or a church or whatever. So this is, again, they considered it content neutral restriction, which it's not content neutral restriction. Like, just make up something else. But this is very, how is it content neutral? It's literally saying it can't be this kind of content. This to me is no different than it's saying you can't have films about how you like or about BLM, Black Lives Matter, next to a school, but it's just content neutral. No, it's not content neutral. So, but the court thinks it is. And again, they use this very like, in some of the other ones, they admitted it's content based. In this one, they said it was content neutral, which very unconvincing. And then they do still bring out, so because it's content neutral and it's targeting the secondary effects of adult theaters of the surrounding community, such secondary effects include increased crime and traffic in areas relating to theater business. They're just stretching at this point. No evidence of increased crime and traffic. I didn't even remember that they said that. Because it is neutral, the ordinance should be designed to serve a substantial government interest and allow for alternative avenues of communication that are content neutral. So again, rational, very, very weak review from the court. As long as you guys have any reason, like just traffic, like that's fine because we don't care about this speech. Brennan dissented. So he said he literally said this should be under strict scrutiny because it is not content neutral, which I think is, does anybody disagree with me? I hope I'm not losing you guys because I realize that you guys aren't law students. So again, so they're basically, the court was saying we don't want these theaters to be ghettoized. So is this content based? No, because it's just aimed at secondary effects. I agree with the professor. I wrote, professor says, of course it's content based. Yeah, this is just bad. So basically this is saying this is softcore pornography. So this is softcore pornography. You can't ban it, but you can zone it. That is that. And then New York v. Ferber is the case about child pornography. So child pornography is its own thing. We don't apply Miller. Anything that depicts children in a sexually explicit manner is not protected. I think you're allowed to depict child nudity, but like in context. Actually, let me just read what they say. So while there is risk that these statutes criminalize protection expression as well, so they're saying even if it, like, they are very like, and I get that, right? The state's interest in prohibiting child pornography outweighs this risk for several reasons. First, states have a compelling interest in safeguarding the physical and psychological well-being of minors. Secondly, the distribution of photographs and films depicting juveniles is intrinsically related to the sexual abuse of children in two ways. The materials produced are a permanent record of the children's participation, and the harm to the child is exacerbated by their circulation. And 2, the distribution network for child pornography must be closed if production of material that requires the sexual exploitation of children is to be effectively controlled. So this is why they're saying that you can't even have this. This is not allowed. You cannot have it. You cannot produce it. This is not Miller. This isn't Obscenity. This is definitely, we need a companion PowerPoint to follow. Yeah, I should have done that. I don't have time. I'm trying to do so many things. The YouTube videos I'll do will be better than this. But this I just like assume that it's going to be discussion. But today's isn't very much discussion because I'm teaching you guys about the obscenity doctrine. Not even very well, because I'm just looking at case notes from a class that I took in my third year of law school, where I did all the reading ahead of time and was very familiar with strict scrutiny and rational basis review and all of that. So I think the kid one is pretty clear. I mean, I think that would, even strict scrutiny, I think would be. So it doesn't have to be hardcore for children. It doesn't have to follow the Miller test. The harm is extreme. The distribution has to be stopped if the production has a chance of being controlled. Miller doesn't have leeway for this, so we adjust Miller. So it doesn't have to be hardcore, and it doesn't have to be looked at as a whole. So even if you have one scene in a 3-hour movie with child porn in it, that content is not you're allowed to go to jail for that. It's not protected. So child pornography is now categorically excluded, like obscenity, and it's easier to meet the burden of child. Basically, if someone's under 18 and they're doing sexually explicit things, even softcore, it's not allowed, or it's not protected, and usually not allowed. Those laws are constitutional. I don't think that one is one that I have an issue with. I just basically have an issue with the obscenity doctrine being so vague, and the idea that it doesn't have any value if it only serves. I feel like making people horny, I'm not saying it's like the greatest type of speech that's integral to the marketplace of ideas, but I also don't think it should be categorically excluded if it only has a period interest. I think they're basically saying that if the only point of it is to make you horny, it's not speech. But I would argue that it falls under that expression point of speech, right? Art, expression. And they're saying it's not artistic. I think okay, first of all, my content has social, political, scientific, and literary value. Can I get a here? Yeah, this is all from this is actually, I'm on the second day of, so this is 2 classes now. This is the second class. So we did 2 classes on obscenity. Here. Yeah. I think my content is definitely has a lot of social value when it comes to speech. So I don't know what the Supreme Court is talking about, but mine would not fall under obscenity. Okay, so here is another. So now we're talking about, we're not in obscenity anymore. We talked about obscenity, and obscenity basically is hardcore porn. And you have to be able to say it has no value to society, scientific, literary. So what do you guys think that means for like Twitter, and like Twitter allows you to post or Pornhub or sex tapes online? Are they obscene? Probably under the doctrine, which in my view, that doctrine needs to be revised. Pornography should be protected speech. If money is protected speech, I think pornography needs to be protected speech. Although I don't have a lot of faith that our current Supreme Court would see it that way. Maybe in the future. But now, just 2 more cases. This one of them starts to go into the internet. So this one is about, what year was this? I'm actually curious about the year for this, because who the fuck listens to the radio anymore? Oh, I didn't write the year. This is FCC versus Pacifica Foundation, I guess. So George Carlin recorded a 12-minute monologue before a live audience in California. The monologue included words that couldn't be said on public airwaves. He repeated those words over and over again. And then a New York radio station owned by Pacifica Foundation, which is the plaintiff, broadcasted the monologue. A few weeks later, a man who stated he had heard the broadcast while driving, I'm laughing because someone said rest in peace, George Carlin. 1978. Thank you. My moderator is on top of this. Is a 1978 case because I mean, who listens to the radio nowadays? Not me. So yeah, a guy was driving with his younger son, and he heard this. It was broadcasted through the radio, and he wrote a letter complaining to the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which was the defendant. The Pacifica said that it was just harmless satire and not obscenity. Additionally, Pacifica noted that before the I don't even know how I'm saying Pacifica right, but it should be right. I don't know. Noted that before the broadcast aired, it issued a warning message noting that the broadcast may contain material that was offensive to some people. But the FCC held Pacifica liable for administrative sanctions. The FCC derived its power to regulate indecent broadcasting under 2 statutes, which forbade any use of obscene, indecent, or profane language by means of radio communications, which encouraged the FCC to which required the FCC to encourage the larger and more effective use of radio in the public interest. So the issue before the court is, under the First Amendment, may the Federal Communications Commission regulate a radio broadcast that is indecent but not obscene? Yes. Under the First Amendment, the FCC may regulate a radio broadcast that is indecent but not obscene. The fact that speech may be considered offensive is not a sufficient reason for suppressing it. So they're saying you can't ban this. The purpose of the First Amendment is to ensure that the government remains neutral in the marketplace of ideas. If the monologue had any redeeming or political value, the speech would likely have been protected by the First Amendment. However, this is not the case. So it's not banned, but they're also basically saying like, well, it didn't have any like value. Like he wasn't using curse words while trying to educate you on something. Like this is basically, yeah, indecent and obscene is a thin line. I agree with you, Terry. Even though the words used by Carlin are not obscene, they are still offensive in the same way obscenity is offensive. The words lack literary, political, or scientific value, and are thus are likely unprotected by the First Amendment. However, even unprotected speech cannot be regulated without limits. Ultimately, the protected. Oh, they said this is I didn't read this before this, but from what I remembered, I thought it didn't say that. I don't know. As you see, we did a bunch of cases each class, and I have not looked at this since my final exam, so bear with me. I hate this case. In this case, but okay, this is basically, so the main point here that the court is pointing to is that ultimately the protected status of speech depends at least in part on the circumstances in which the speech is made. In this case, the offensive speech was made in a public radio broadcast. Traditionally, broadcasts receive the least amount of First Amendment protection because they involve content streamed into people's homes. Thus, if the content is offensive, it possibly violates the individual's right to be left alone and free. Yeah, this is what I remember from the case. Basically, they're saying that and this is, if you guys see, there's so much that comes into this that I cannot tell you in a Twitch stream or like 10 Twitch streams, but the forum where the speech is happening, like I said, is important. So if you're out in public, you don't have a right to not hear other people's protests or whatever. But in your home, you have a very high expectation of privacy. And so what they're trying to say here is that because the radio is being broadcasted into people's homes and people aren't expecting it, that therefore we would allow for more intense regulations and prohibitions on this kind of speech because of that. So we have a concurrence by Powell I'm not going to read. We have a dissent by Stewart and Brennan. So this is content-based and the court admits it. But he talks about the forum. So this is an intrusive medium, comes into your car, comes into your home. So it can't be banned, but it can be zoned. And this is, so basically this is public discourse. Entertainment is value and leisure. I agree. I feel like entertainment is value, but I don't know. Now compare this to Sable Communications of California versus federal FCC. So in this, this was about phone sex. So we're starting to get closer to the internet, guys. This was 1989. This was about the internet. So Sable Communications of California, SCC, I'll say from now on, began offering sexually oriented pre-recorded telephone messages through the Pacific Bell Telephone Network. So in 1988, the Communication Act of 1934 was amended to include an outright ban on indecent as well as obscene interstate commercial telephone messages. And then the SCC basically said this is a violation of the First Amendment. And the court actually said it is. And the court compared it to FCC v. Pacifica and said that the difference is the forum. Here, it's not just going to come into your home, right? Your phone isn't going to ring and then all of a sudden there's just like phone sex being blurted out. It's not like turning on the evening news or turning on, whatever. You are calling in to get these messages. So they distinguish it from that case for that reason. They say, they said that in Pacifica, the court noted the unique nature of broadcasting. For example, radio broadcasting easily streams into people's home and implicates their right to privacy. It also has the unique ability to reach children, and that the listener had no real ability to control his or her exposure to indecent speech. In the present case, however, the listener who chose to dial in and pay for an indecent phone message took significant affirmative steps to receive that message. Thus, there was no captive audience problem, and there was no risk that people who didn't want to hear it would be exposed to it. So here, the court is really looking at the fact that you need to have a credit card, enter an access code, do everything in order to get to this message. So it's not just happening to you. It's not you're driving and you see nudity. It's not that you're just trying to listen to the radio with your family and this happens. So I think these are the kinds of cases that would be used if we're looking at porn and the internet today. If you sign on to an OnlyFans account, or if you log into Pornhub, it's one thing versus if you go to CNN.com to look at the news and there's porn on there, which there isn't. But I think that is one thing that makes sense for them to look at. Like, are you able to avoid it when you're online? Like if you're trying not to see it, or you're not trying not to see it. If you're trying to do normal things on the internet, should you be exposed to porn? Versus if you're going to go look for it. Now, this interesting part is the exposure to children. They argued here children wouldn't have a credit card, they wouldn't have this, they wouldn't have that. Well, nowadays any child under 18 can log on to Pornhub, and there's no way to really prevent that. All they can do is make you check a box saying you're 18, which if you're trying to see porn and you're under 18, you would almost certainly check the box. Now we have this digital Communication Society is more comfortable with the right context as before when lines got blurry. What do you mean? Side story for chat, but one time in elementary school, I was taken to call a Red Cross hotline to get details on how to donate stuff for our class. Donate stuff our class collected. I called the number I copied down from our school phone, and I swapped two numbers by accident and got a phone sex line. I freaked out and hung up and went right back to my classroom. Yeah, I mean, you were exposed to it unwillingly, but I think that's a rare case. But that's kind of the case people make, that we should all be banned everywhere. So this case got strict scrutiny for that reason. Also, this would have completely banned the material and not just zoned it, regulated it. I think that's another thing to look at. So you basically, the distinction between this and the radio case is that with this, you have to take affirmative steps in order to see the indecent content. Now here is the one on the internet. So this is 1997. We're not at 2022, but this is 1997. Probably the last case I talk about, and then I'll just hear your comments or any clarifications or anything you guys want me to make, because I understand this was probably kind of confusing. But I just was, I didn't like prepare for a class. I just knew this kind of stuff and I wanted to talk about it, and also hear maybe what you guys think should be the law when it comes to pornography, because we have people that want to ban it, or like Twitter and pornography, or Reddit and pornography. I think Reddit is definitely doing you have to turn on your not safe for work tab thingy or whatever. Twitter, I think, has like, you have, if it's like if you're just like on Twitter looking at random stuff, I don't know, can like porn videos pop up, or is this something that says sensitive material and then you have to click on it? I run a sex work Twitter, so I log on to Twitter and I see people's buttholes. So I don't know. All these laws just to protect prudes and bratty kids. I agree. The obscenity law and obscenity doctrine needs to be revised, and we need more clear guidelines when it comes to internet and pornography and protecting online, especially with now we have online sex work, right? And there's a lot of sex workers that want to end discrimination against sex work, which is different constitutional issue, but then some of that involves maybe clashing with laws that prohibit pornography or whatever, and affecting the ability of the sex worker to promote their work. So this last case I'll talk about, but this kind of gets into a little bit of the internet. So this is Reno versus ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union. So there's a provision of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. It's called the Indecent Transmission Provision. Prohibited the knowing transmission of obscene or indecent messages via the internet to any recipient under the age of 18. The patently offensive display provision of the CDA prohibited the knowing sending or displaying of patently offensive messages in a manner that is available to a person under 18 years. The ACLU brought suit. Oh, shit. These are all on OneNote, and I can't like scroll on OneNote easily. Or maybe you can, I just can't. The ACLU sued. Question is whether federal statutes enacted to protect minors from indecent and patently offensive communications on the internet violate the First Amendment. They said yes. And they said the CDA is distinguishable from the regulation upheld in Pacifica for several reasons. Firstly, the order in Pacifica was issued by an agency that had been regulating radio stations for decades, and the regulation targeted a specific broadcast that was a dramatic departure from traditional program content. In contrast, the CDA represents a broad categorical prohibition of internet content that is not limited to particular times and not dependent on any evaluation by an agency familiar with the internet. Secondly, unlike the CDA, the FCC's order was not punitive. Finally, in Pacifica, the court reasoned that radio stations have a long history of government regulation and limited First Amendment protection. In contrast, the internet has no such history. The CDA is specifically designed to protect minor children from primary effects of indecent and patently offensive speech rather than any secondary effects of speech. Thus, the CDA is a content-based restriction on speech and could not be properly analyzed as a time, place, and manner regulation. It is thus appropriate for the court to use strict scrutiny in determining the whenever they say they're applying strict scrutiny, 99% of the time that means that they're striking something down as being unconstitutional. So interesting there is that they talk about how the internet is a different ballgame, and the radio is known for, it has this reputation, it's been this way for a long time. The internet's kind of a free-for-all now, and it doesn't have this protected tradition of being family friendly in all aspects, right? So that is, and there was 2 other cases we did, but I think we're just gonna, these are about one is about animal cruelty, which is not relevant to this. The other one is about violent video games, where basically the court used strict scrutiny when it came to banning violent video games, which basically means it's very hard for states to actually ban violent video games. So, and the reason they did that is because violence is not a categorical exclusion like obscenity. So, well, here's a question to challenge you. Do we need porn in any way, shape, or form? Do we need porn in any way, shape, or form? So are you saying, is porn a necessity to life? Like, are we going to be, oh my God, is this how I've been the whole time? Is porn necessary for us? I mean, no, I wouldn't say it's like at the the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but what do we actually need? What do we need in general, other than what we need to survive? And I guess what the argument you're making is it of any actual societal value? I think the argument can be made that it is. I think some people can make the argument that it's harmful. Some people can make the argument that it's beneficial. I mean, like, the exact opposite of what a lot of studies set out to do was to try to prove that porn leads to violence, has actually shown a lot of times the opposite, an inverse effect, almost like a cathartic effect, when it comes to people consuming this kind of porn. There's some negative effects to it. Some people get addicted. They have unrealistic ideas surrounding sex. We talked about this all in my porn one. A upside to it is that people can explore their sexuality. If you're, gay or trans or something, and you don't know, or you have a specific kink, or have questions about anatomy even, porn is not always the best teacher, but sometimes it's the only type of representation people in a certain community have. So the debates on whether porn is harmful there's certainly one that can be had. But I think that saying that porn has zero positive effect on anybody ever at any time is also overbroad. And I think that it's like saying, well, does the TV show you're watching, do we need to have HBO at all? Like, do we need HBO in any shape, way, or form? Like, no, but why not is kind of my response to that. I don't think the only things that should be protected are what we need, right? I like what somebody said, that entertainment is a value on its own. I agree with that. I think some things are here solely for entertainment. And a lot of times the way the court looks at it is, oh, it's artistic expression, it's art or whatever, a TV show or a movie is art expression. And that's what part of the Miller test, when they say look at it as a whole. So it's not like if you have a 3-hour movie and you have a sex scene in it, it's considered obscene. What they're really targeting is hardcore porn, which is not a movie. It's not no literary or artistic value. It's just there to period interest. It's there to make you horny. And that is not something that we need to protect, is what they're saying. But your question, whether we need it, is we don't need a lot of things that we still enjoy. You don't need pizza. Like, do we need pizza? No. In fact, you could argue pizzas can be very, it's an unhealthy food. Why do you need it? So I don't think that's a good line of reasoning. Do you really need butter on your toast? Exactly. But I think that's a good question. It's not a question of whether it's harmful. It's about what would be the need to defend it or make it easy to obtain. Sorry. I've been reading so much, guys, and I've just been Kind of, so sorry if things aren't as clear. I will try to get better at being a law professor, I guess. Let me know if you guys want, first of all, let me know what I can do to make discussions like this easier, if these are discussions you guys still want to have. And two, what kinds of stuff you guys want to talk about. Do you guys want to continue down free speech? Do you guys want to do one on hate speech? Maybe I'll try to be more organized and get a PowerPoint up if I do this again. I know today was not that kind of day, but I also don't have like a ton of time to be like having a complete law seminar every Monday. But the other question, it's not a question of whether it's harmful. It's about what would be the need to defend it or make it easy to pay. I mean, I think me and Hazard Stint kind of with his comment are what would be the need to defend Breaking Bad as a TV show? What would be the need to defend Netflix? What would be the need to, why do we need to make Netflix easy to obtain? Why do we have to make, so there's a lot of things that society doesn't need that are there just purely for entertainment value that can be valuable to some people. I mean, some people really enjoy some people watch porn with their spouses or their girlfriends and their boyfriends, and it actually has led to increased sexual satisfaction in their sex lives and stuff. So I think for some people it can be very beneficial. So that would be one need to defend it. I think the question is about whether it's harmful, because that's what we're doing. We're balancing. Okay. If it wasn't harmful, we would have no need to regulate it at all, right? We don't try to regulate if someone puts on YouTube a short film they created about pillows. It's not really necessary for us, but so the question is, does it need to be regulated because it's harmful? And the courts, even though they don't outright say it, other than when they reference secondary negative effects of it, they try to say, oh, it's just not valuable. But then in other parts of it, they say it doesn't have value and it's kind of, immoral. It can kind of be bad. And that's why it's such a, I mean, we're pretty uptight about sex here in the United States. Well, I could argue that the art of movies and themes carries a lot of weight and lessons for us. Breaking Bad or streaming websites have a lot of value, but what's the real value of porn that a real relationship honestly wouldn't be better in? Well, a lot of people don't have access to real relationships. So I would argue that if you're saying that the themes and whatever of Breaking Bad or streaming, whatever, these have artistic value, if you're arguing basically what the courts argue, that releasing a sexual urge isn't actually of any value versus movies and art and whatever, that a lot of them are, especially these days, 50% pornography in it anyway. So is that artistic? Is Game of Thrones artistic porn? I don't know. But when you say a real relationship honestly wouldn't be better in, a lot of people aren't in real relationships, and a lot of people use porn as an outlet to explore a kink or something that they're interested in that they don't feel comfortable exploring in their regular relationships. But is porn really a replacement for that? Nobody says it's a replacement. Nobody says if you watch, you either watch porn or you're in a relationship. A lot of people in relationships watch porn, and a lot of people single watch porn. I don't think porn has anything to do with your relationship status. And I think for a lot of people, it's a pleasurable experience. So if it's a pleasurable experience, I think that on its own brings it societal value. But I'm open to arguments that disagree, arguments against it. And then let's look at the other side of it, right? The people who create it, like me. Isn't that my ability to express myself and my body the way that I want to do it and make a living for myself and my livelihood? We're looking at it only as a consumption. What about us creators? What about OnlyFans? Isn't OnlyFans a way for me to express my body and my art and my content? It's my content. Who are you to say that the content I produce doesn't have any social value? Who are we trusting to be the judge of what kind of content has value and what doesn't? But then why not just have sex? LOL. Why watch this stuff rather than participate? Why? Yeah, I like what Hazard said. Why are there just two options here? It's I don't understand what you're talking about. So you're saying that because people can just be in real relationships, there's no value to porn? Like, why watch porn? Why don't you just go have sex? Porn is completely, there are people that there are people that watch porn and then have sex. There are people that watch porn while they have sex. So they're not something that is like, okay, you either do it in person or you consume it online. I think a lot of times people do both. Majority of people do both. And some people can't do or don't have the ability at the moment when they're horny, right, to go find somebody or wine and dine them until they have sex with them. Some people just want to watch porn in their room. It's easier, it's simple, and they get their nut off. What social value would you say your content in particular bring? Wait, let me go back up a little bit here. Being turned on makes you feel alive, and that's an amazing expression of freedom. So yeah, I mean, being horny and jerking off and masturbating or being sexually satisfying yourself gives you dopamine. Some people argue that it's too much dopamine and that it affects your ability to be satisfied with normal sex. Some people honestly make that point. It's just too good. It's too good. We're too sexy. Now you're expecting everybody to have titties like me. I'm just kidding. Well, that's a good question. Why are you expressing yourself like that? What social value would you say your content in particular brings? I do it because people want to see it, and I get messages every single day from people that tell me they work long hours this, they work long hours that, they have cancer, they just went through a divorce. I had the guy literally message me yesterday saying that his wife died. They've been married for 30 years. His wife died, and seeing my content because I remind him of her makes him feel closer to her. Now, you may not agree with him. You would be like, well, if my wife died, but that's not your call. You can't be the arbiter for what everybody else finds valuable or the value that my content brings for so many other people. I mean, Hazard Stint is in this chat. He messages me all the time and damn near tells me that subscribing to my OnlyFans almost changed his fucking life, mostly because of the additional stuff that I bring into it too. But for some people, they have jobs and they come home, just like some people want to have a glass of wine or they want to watch Breaking Bad. Some people want to watch my news and watch the stuff I post and purchase my videos. And that's how they wind down for the day. Who are you to say that it doesn't bring, who are you or the courts or anyone to say that that's not valuable? I understand wanting to protect minors from it, right? Which is why I think OnlyFans is a really great platform, because it's so strict on verification. You cannot be underage on there, nor can you be underage to like get on it. Now, obviously, if you steal your mom's credit card and you do all this, I mean, you can do that for almost anything. But yeah, okay, I'm gonna go down. Sorry, I'm like late to this. All art, sports, and entertainment would be questioned with logic. Why watch the World Series instead of play the game yourself? Right? Because it's fantasy. Why do you watch movies? Because the fantasy is sometimes better than the real thing. Yeah, these are all really good points. If it's there to indulge in things we don't have the nerve to do in real life, does it also serve as protection in potential harm in others? So that's kind of the thing we were talking about, where some of the studies actually do show this. Some studies show that exposure to hardcore porn actually decreases violence in real life, because I think the argument is that it can have a cathartic effect. Okay, I have this urge, I know it's wrong to go like rape somebody, but maybe watching hardcore porn can give me that release. And we haven't found any evidence that watching that makes you more likely to go do it, except for a very, very, very small percentage of men that are already predisposed to probably do it anyway. It just maybe increases their them wanting to do it. But in general, the inverse has been shown. What's all the additional stuff? You add this stream, for instance. Do you think they are truly elevated by seeing you naked? Which again is not about me saying it's worthless. I technically haven't made a value judgment, but it's something that needs to be considered. Yeah, I think Do you think whether I think they're truly elevated or you think they're truly elevated is of no consequence, my dear. It's about them. We're not here to tell them whether or not this is good for them. I'm not here to police people about ordering cheese pizza instead of a salad, or by watching porn instead of watching a History Channel documentary, right? That's not my call or your call. If I'm making people feel good and they're enjoying it and we're consenting adults, that's valuable in my opinion. Here's a question. Was your pursuit to create porn done from an altruistic point of view? Not necessarily, but who does any job solely for an altruistic point of view, right? I was a lawyer. I mean, I'm still a lawyer, but when I was practicing law and I was just helping rich people not pay federal estate tax, I didn't become that for an altruistic purpose, right? I wasn't like, oh, these poor rich people, they're paying, they have more than $12 million and they just want to pass it on to their heirs. What am I, like, what kind of job? Like, there are not a lot of jobs people solely get into for an altruistic purpose. But when I did do it, I did it as a form of expression. I did it as a form of extra income. And a great byproduct of that is that it does help people. And I get messages all the time saying that they love my content and that it makes them feel good. So, I mean, if you look at sex work in general, a lot of people go to prostitutes and sex workers for intimacy. I've had people buy sessions with me just to talk because they feel lonely. So sometimes just having a stranger or a pretty woman talk to you is what people are looking for. So who are you to say that, well, do you think that's really good for them? That's very paternalistic, and I don't think that's helpful. Hazard Stinson, he's definitely elevated when I watch her. You're dodging the question. I'm asking, how do you feel? I feel like they're truly elevated. I definitely feel like Hazard Stint is truly elevated by watching her. So if you're asking that, yeah, I do feel like they are. I feel like I'm actually making people feel good. I'm not dodging anything. I was just trying to make the argument that it doesn't even matter what we feel. But if we're talking about what we feel, I do feel that. So why do you want to express yourself in that way, though? Why not be a writer or a therapist? Well, why would the writer not be a therapist? Why isn't the therapist a writer? Why isn't everybody doctors? People do what they feel like doing. I enjoy sex work. I wouldn't enjoy being a writer at all. That's why. Or a horse trainer or a bridge engineer? Yeah, why not? Why are you not in the Peace Corps? I don't understand. Why are you here in the chat? Why are you not in the Peace Corps? Why do you enjoy sex work? It's fun. And I make people feel good. And I make great money. I actually don't see any downside from it. Like, what's the reason? I can't answer that question. I think you just hate that I do sex work, bro. You asked me the question. I don't think you can answer it. I think I can answer it. And I just told you, I like it. It's fun. I get to feel sexy and be sexy. I get to express myself. And I get to make a shit ton of money. Why do you do your job? Jazzy's OF content is like seeing the feminine ravishing in her physical self. It's almost spiritual, plus getting to know her through these streams. I mean, there's been since the onset of the internet and YouTube, there's content creators, right? People watch YouTubers. People literally watch YouTubers who do nothing but eat. Like, what is it called? A mukbang? There are people who watch YouTubers do nothing but vlog their day, and they like them and they connect with them and they connect with these YouTubers who, I could sit there and be like, but do you really think that like you're bringing value to people by vlogging your trip to Target? It's not my business. If people if this chick wants to vlog her trip to Target and people watch it, I think I have more important things to think about. So again, you keep saying you're expressing yourself, but like, what are you expressing and what in this avenue? I'm expressing my sexuality. I'm sharing my body with the world, which many people find attractive. And why in this avenue? Because it's a very easy avenue for me to reach millions of people like anybody does on the internet. Does anybody think this person is making good points? You're free to continue to comment, but because that was the avenue and content she wanted to use. Yeah. I think he may be lost. He just asked the sex worker what he actually expresses. Yeah, I'm answering all your questions, but sometimes you don't like my answers and you're telling me you can answer my questions better than I can. And then I give you answers and you just don't like them. Bro, it's okay if you don't get the answer you want. Yeah, I think that's his problem. He wants me to give like a different answer. But yep, that is Obscenity. Sorry it was a little bit all over the place. Law school, if I convince you to go from that, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of reading. But you do learn how to think. So you don't end up like that guy. BASSVZZ, whatever his name is. No, it's not that I want a different answer. I'm asking for the complexity of your thoughts. It's really not everything is very complex, baby. Like sometimes, like if you're like, why do you want pizza tonight? But why? Why not salad? Why not a burger? You're not answering the question. Do you feel like pizza elevates you? No. I'm asking if you think like sometimes it's just like, I didn't want to work in an office and I didn't want to do law for the rest of my life in that context. This was an outlet for me. I enjoy it. I make great money. I'm able to connect with a lot of people and I'm like changing people's lives on the low, at least from the messages I'm getting. I'm inspiring other people to not, to question societal norms, to do what makes them happy, to, break stereotypes. I've had so many people from the Middle East specifically message me and be like, hey, it's great that you do this because in our culture, it's so taboo. And seeing you be free with yourself makes me want to come out as gay or come out as bi or come out as trans. So I think that's a great societal value. Why? Let's put up Drizzle Drippin's comment. Why would any sculptor change the shape of any piece of rock? Because they have the skill, ability, and desire to do so. If people want to do it and desire it, then there will be, if people want it and desire it, then there will be a demand. I don't know why I'm reading it here. So here. Yep. Because I provide something, a service, product, content that people enjoy consuming. I think that's it. That's the fucking standard. That should be the standard, right? I think when it comes to obscenity, I think that I understand the protections put in place for unwilling unwilling people that, I get it. Nobody you don't want to drive to work and the billboard is like completely like somebody's spread open pussy. Can we ban Ethan just because he keeps talking about rating and I don't even know what that means, but he needs to go. But essentially, you're stuck at the surface level of just doing something for its sake, but you're not asking why the service is different from others. It's not different from others. That's the whole point. Any service appeals to some people and it doesn't appeal to other people. It doesn't have to be new or novel or change the world or give me a Nobel Peace Prize. What's the difference between a sculptor and a porn star? Well, certainly time and skill. So you just have an issue with porn and porn stars. I think a better stream for you would have been a couple of streams ago where we talked about male grievance, the manosphere, the incel problem. I think those are better suited for you than this stream. But you're welcome to be here. Yeah, he doesn't like porn stars. Even if he's just trolling, though, I like to address these problems and make them realize how stupid they are. And I know sometimes it doesn't reach them, but everybody else watching can sometimes be like, yeah, what an idiot. And they won't use this rhetoric in the future. So that's one of the reasons I address it. Because, he is an idiot, but a lot of people might say this. Yeah, well, these bitches aren't doing anything. And then maybe they hear my stream and I'm like, no, this happens, this. And they see what other people and they realize that, she does it because she enjoys it and it pays well. There's nothing else to it. Well, apparently I have to distinguish it from other things people do because he doesn't think that it requires skill. But, not everything, like I said, there are YouTubers that are literally just famous for, that have a large following for eating on camera. So yeah, he's all low key. Oh no, I have no problem with it, but why would anyone find it valuable? Like, why? Like, come on. But I do enjoy, like, I know some people would just like stop addressing him, but I personally like addressing people like him because they're so dumb that like it's good to also push back against that rhetoric as much as we can. It's great to hear you address the topic as it's applicable to your present lifestyle and any conflict from it. Yeah, that's why I chose obscenity to start with, because especially with the talk on Twitter, and I know Ben Shapiro made this argument. He's like, yeah, I think it should be, if it's like the public forum, if Elon takes over, but then something shouldn't be around, like pornography. Twitter shouldn't allow pornography. And that's always been the case that people on the right make. Like, why are people getting banned for anti-Semitism, but people are allowed to put porn on there? So it seems like you're taking an easy way to do life by choosing sex work and trying to intellectualize it. Nobody's trying to intellectualize it. And yeah, people want, I'm sorry. First of all, I'm not going to lie. Everybody wants their life to be easier. You probably would too. I'm sorry. If somebody just if you just won the lottery, would you just be like, I'm sorry, I don't want the easy way in life. No, that is part of it. But lucky me that I also serve a lot of value to a lot of people. Some people in this very chat. So wonderful byproduct. If you won the lottery, if I just won the lottery, I wouldn't be able to help people like Hazard Stint, Terry, Drizzle Drippin', all of these people that enjoy my streams, enjoy my content, and enjoy my titties. So lucky me. I think the problem is this: there's no legislation made to stop you from being a plumber, but porn is clearly different from these services. You don't need to insult me for asking these questions. Porn is not, there's no legislation stopping porn either, but the difference, if you're asking for the difference in that, it's literally because some people think that all of our laws need to be shaped by their religious and social beliefs, right? So it's like saying, well, you know, you work at Planned Parenthood, and that person that's a plumber, his job isn't threatened by legislation about abortion. Yeah, because abortion is a controversial topic, because there are right-wingers that think that this should be criminalized because it goes against their religion and their Bible. Same thing with porn. There are people who think porn should be gone because marriage should be only between a man. You may be one of these people, between a man and a woman, and nobody should be consuming pornographic content. It's bad for your soul. It's haram in the Quran. It's whatever. These are not good reasons for legislation, or good reasons to ban anything, right? Catholics don't believe in contraception. Like, you know, you're trying to make it seem spiritual when you're really just opening your legs for men because it's easy. I'm not trying to make it spiritual. I don't know where you're getting the spiritual aspect. I'm admitting that it is a really easy way to make a lot of money, which I think is the root of your issue with it. But I also enjoy it. So what is a job? I think a job is any way that you make money and support yourself. If I have an easy way of doing that also people enjoy consuming, why do you have a problem with it? I'd stop what I do if I could go into full-time sex work. You know, yeah, that's why I think you're just jealous. Like the people that are, not you, but the people that have a problem with it. You see it all the time. This is an easy way out. It's an easy way out. Everybody wants an easy way out of having to work a job that they do not like. So no, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, oh, this has nothing to do with the fact that I make a shit ton of money from my room chilling. I do. Yeah. Sorry. That's the point, Jazmen. So clearly there's something significant that needs to be discussed, but we shouldn't call me stupid because I'm asking about it. I'm calling you stupid because you're not making any points. What is the significant thing that needs to be discussed? What is the significant? What is it? What is your issue with porn? What is it? So like, you're just asking me questions and I'm answering your questions and you're unhappy with my answers. If you have a point to make the point. I don't think she's trying to make it spiritual. I think it takes great courage to expose yourself. For some people, it takes a lot of courage to expose themselves. For some people, it doesn't. That's, again, it's a personal choice. Series is bringing value through a different perspective. I'm open to hear perspectives as long as they go somewhere. If someone's just like, but why do you do it? And I'm like, oh, because of this. That's not why. Like, that's not really actual debating. There are legal requirements to be a license. So you're saying, so anything that requires a requirement, so drizzle dripping, are you talking about if you don't need a license to do it, then it's not valid? So like your cashier, your plumber, or I mean, I don't know if a plumber needs to be licensed. I guess some do. Or your janitor, or your, I mean, so many things don't even require a degree. I have a degree to practice law, and I choose to do something that doesn't require any degree that I make way more money in, and I'm fine with that. I don't think everyone wants an easy way out. I think that's a very uncharitable to people in general. I will say that if people could be making the kind of money I'm making, probably you yourself, from being able to post your chest online into your fucking asshole, you would be doing it. I have a feeling. If not you, a lot more people would be doing it, because he would fail as a sex worker. Yep. Can we put the comment after hit that on there? This is essentially what the issue is with these men, right? We see this in the incel forums. We see this all the time. These men are upset at women because they see that we have an advantage. These are men that actually usually don't do well with women. We talked about some of the studies that point to that, or they perceive that they don't do well with women, which is usually means they don't do well with women. And they have a disdain for women because of that. And especially when they see that they are working so hard, they aren't getting, the things they want in life. And then there are women like me that are able to come online, are able to, make money this way, especially when we're smart. They have a bigger issue with it. I don't think he can call me, what is it? He can't be like, you don't have any talents, whatever, like some people say before they find out that I am very intelligent and I'm a lawyer. So now he's just going with, well, why don't you do something beneficial to society? You spent the whole time devaluing her profession, then you cry when she calls you stupid. Yeah, that's how this works with them. I could work full-time at a glory hole or provide a service by selling drugs, but there's no integrity or dignity here. So if you're comparing selling drugs to putting my content on, so you're saying that there's a harm in putting in porn. So that's a separate question, whether there's a harm in porn or not, right? From what we looked at in the study, you should watch my porn one. It's like 3 to 6% of men, or 4 is like the average percent of men that will get an addiction to porn. But that's like saying, why operate a casino? Why are you operating? People can get a gambling addiction. Why are you operating a casino? But let me guess, you don't have a problem with people that sell alcohol or operate casinos. You have a problem with me because I'm a woman and because I am selling my body online and making decent money out of it. It makes you sad because you don't have such opportunities, nor do you have access to women like me. It's usually the case. Unless you have a better argument to make, go ahead and make it. We will address it. So when you're talking about integrity and dignity also, you are insinuating that there's no dignity in selling your body online. That's your opinion. You are correlating morality with sexual purity or modesty, which we have talked about many times on my Twitch streams. I do not correlate the two. If you correlate the two, that's your problem. But maybe you should stop consuming it, because the way you probably found me was on Reddit or Instagram or somewhere where you were probably lurking because you were trying to see some porn. So that's between you and your pastor. Or how is he devaluing her profession? He's just questioning her. He's not actually questioning me on anything substantive, though. I've answered all his questions. Got to start posting my chest and asshole. Do it. So my issue here is there's not a great purpose to porn beyond the rush of dopamine, but it's something that is created usually by people who aren't happy in their own lives. Where did you get that statistic from? Is this anecdotal? Where is this coming from? Is this something you're telling yourself to feel better? Is there any statistic you can point to say that OnlyFans girls are very unhappy? So where are you getting that? Because you just said it. You're like, oh, people that do this aren't happy. I can tell you I'm very happy. Happy is subjective, but I'm much happier now than I was working in a law firm. So at least based on my anecdotal experience, that's false. So I would like some evidence to counter that. That's actually substantive. But more to that point, most men who consume porn are the very men you're literally criticizing. Lonely men who aren't having relationships are vast consumers, house porn helping them. So I think it's up to 90 something percent of men consume porn. So are 90 something percent of men lonely? Again, maybe point to real facts and I can address them. Yes, are lonely men consuming porn? Yes. Are not lonely men consuming porn? Yes. I have literally had some of the most successful men that you can think of slide into my DMs or know me in real life that watch a shit ton of porn. And some of them have found me through the same avenues you found me with. And they have 800 bitches on their fucking line. But they don't have this kind of mindset because they have access to women. So they don't have that kind of hate for women that you seem to have. I'm enjoying this. I don't care how much money you make. Money is irrelevant to the conversation. When we're talking about jobs and what people do for a living, money is relevant. There's a lot of, how many people, if everybody tomorrow, their boss said, I'm no longer paying you, how many people would stay in their jobs? Money is a factor, obviously, in people doing jobs. Many people do jobs they do not want to do because of the money. So. No, I was responding to a comment above equating no legislation about being a plumber and sex work being different. Oh, I was commenting there's actual requirements to do craft work that are managed by state and local governments. Yeah, good point. Sorry. I get confused with comments sometimes. Jazmen, think for a second. If I'm here. Do you really think I hate you or dislike you? Oh, I would just leave if I hated you. I'm not saying you like have this rage against me, but yeah, there are plenty of people that consume my content that dislike what I do or have an issue with what I do or have this disdain for women like me. There are people that literally watch all my content and try to comment negative things. There are a lot of people that watch all my content and then comment that only simps watch this kind of content. This is very common in incel, the manosphere culture. They do this. They hate themselves for doing it. They have like this cognitive dissonance with themselves. They try to overcompensate for their low status in society. And that is where that comes from. So with you, when you're like, well, what's the value to this? And I explain some of the values and you're like, no, those aren't good enough. And you're probably only, what you're trying to say is I'm doing it as an easy way out, which means that it is not actually valuable because I'm doing it. You're looking at her intent, the ability for her to make a lot of money. When I'm telling you, no, people find value in it. You're like, well, do they really though? How do we know that they're actually finding value in it? See, what you're doing is you're trying to get to a conclusion that you actually want to get to, which is viewing what I do as negative, dismissing all the positive effects that I've explained that it has on people, the positive effects that people in this chat are telling you that they have when they consume my content. You're dismissing all of that, making up stuff about how only unhappy people do this and only unhappy people consume this based on no evidence, and using that to support your conclusion that you're not even very clear about. I'm telling you this from talking to OnlyFans girls and men who consume porn. Well, I also talk to a lot of OnlyFans girls, and I talk to a lot of men that consume porn, probably more than you do. And I have completely different facts on that. And I'm not trying to use those to make a overreaching claim like you are. Right? When you're like, most men who consume this are unhappy. And I'm like, well, 90% of men consume this. So are 90% of men unhappy? Where are you getting your statistic from? You're probably unhappy. So the men around you are probably unhappy. That's kind of what that tells me. Yes, a lot of people choose this profession because they're curious. For example, young women in high school, but someone choose it because they like to do it. Yeah. It's not one size fits all. Some of us do it because we enjoy it. Some of us do it because some of us do it because some women get into it because they don't have any other option. Clearly, I have a lot of options and I chose to do it and I'm very happy with it. Yes, a huge portion of men are lonely. That a growing number of men are lonely, but I don't think it's 90-something%. I don't think all of the athletes and musicians and stuff I know in real life that have an abundance of women are watching porn because they're lonely. I've had boyfriends that we were madly in love with and we watched porn together and neither of us were lonely. You, I can tell, my assumption is that you're kind of lonely and that may be why you consume. Not all men who watch porn are lonely and unhappy. That is generalizing. Agreed. Yeah, but Jazmen, they don't care about you as a person. See that you guys see this kid? He's literally like, oh, well now, okay, forget all that. Now they don't actually see you as a person. They see you as an object. First of all, not true for a lot of them. And second of all, if that's that great, who cares? I'm providing a service. I don't need every single one of my fans to view me as a individual. That may be a value you have. Maybe you want people to notice you as an individual. I'm sure many people don't notice you at all, but if they do, then I hope that they see you for your needs and your wants and your deepest desires and fears, and you guys can have these long conversations. I am more than happy to provide a service to men, and they can see me as an object and we can all move on with our lives. I don't find that as something that bothers me. If it bothers you on my behalf, thank you for your concern. I don't know her and I care about her. Don't make assumptions. Jazmen, I'm not that person. You got to talk to me like I'm the guy, just a guy on the internet. Not whatever else you think. Okay, now I think he's like he's getting like weird now. Does anyone else agree? I'm not that person. Who's that person? And this is why I dislike the porn industry. Actors are just things. They are so disrespected. So are you in the porn industry? Like, I mean, I'm in the adult content industry. I have a lot of friends in the content industry, and we're fine. I don't feel disrespected. I don't care about Logan Paul or Andrew Tate, but I'll watch their social media. I don't think they expect people to actually care for them. Yeah, us content creators, like, do you care about Kim Kardashian as a person? Do you care about, like, anybody you see online as a person? No, some people are there to entertain you and produce content for you. I have plenty of people in my life who care about me. I really don't. If hundreds of thousands of people, which is like millions of people at this point that have seen my content, all deeply cared about me, I think that would be very overwhelming and disturbing. But the positive effects these people have is just a rush of dopamine. It's like eating candy, but how healthy is candy and law? So are you mad at people that produce candy? The creator of Skittles? Do you have an issue with the person who invented Skittles? Would you be questioning them like this? Would you be like, you see what I'm saying? Like, that was exactly my point, is if you're making an argument that the only things that should be available in society are the things that you determine are healthy and good, that's not a society I want to live in. Damn, speaking of lonely, he seems lonely as hell. Yeah, it's very obvious. Personally, I like to know who's behind the vids. Thank you. Isn't it as sleazy as it was in the 90s? It's more available and part of our everyday lives, just as sexual attraction is. Yeah, a lot of people are very sex positive. I will say a lot of, especially like my European fans, people that live in more sex positive communities, they're very open. Like, we will have a sexing session, they will nut, and then they'll be like, hey, thank you, have a great night. And we're like completely like, I hope you're great. Hope your day is wonderful. Hope you have a good weekend. I'm like, you too. Like, it's like any other service. It's like getting a massage, getting a pedicure. Like, I'm not like looking at the person rubbing my feet like, do I see you as a person? I mean, yeah, I guess, you're providing me a service. Now you're trying to associate porn with an unhealthy diet. Most people have unhealthy, and most people consume porn, and most people probably are doing some unhealthy things. I think this person is, you can tell, is not happy. Happy people do not behave like this. We all know that. We do it because we enjoy it. So you pick something that would make you a social outcast. You have a lot of options and you chose this for easy money. Why would you want to do this? Great question. Because first of all, I'm not really a social outcast. I have plenty of family, friends, so many men on my line. I don't even know what to do with it. You guys should see this is just personal messages just from being on this chat. Ding, 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 ding. But I don't live my life in accordance with other people's values. And I don't live my life. I live to make myself happy. So if some random person like you, a guy that I would never notice in real life, that I would never talk to in real life, that I would just walk by and never knew you existed, I don't care what you think. Jazmen, why do you think I'm lonely? Because I have a different opinion. I think you're lonely because you have this view towards porn and sex work, and you're associating it with lonely people, etc., and you're also consuming it. So why would you have an opinion that only lonely people consume it and you also consume it? If you weren't lonely, you wouldn't think that. Pretty sure the porn industry is very different from adult content creators. In a way, yes. With OnlyFans, we control all our content. It's very different than traditional porn. I talked to an actor or athlete about their performance as well. That's how they relate to the world. I happily tell Jazz how smart she is or how incredibly sexy. Thank you. Okay, let's try this exercise. Why shouldn't you be creating porn? Argue this from the other side. Why shouldn't I be creating porn? Because some people have problems with it. Is that a good reason? Because children have access to it. Well, children are going to have access to it either way. Because the Bible says it's really wrong. I don't believe in mythical sky gods, so that one's out. What do you think? Before I left my job, I didn't think about this because some people may not respect me as much. I don't care what they think. I can't think of anything else. Can you? It's like getting your mechanics. Jazmen, would you notice any of these guys in the chat though? For real, you definitely not. I can tell. Maybe not any of these other guys too, but that's why this forum is really great, so they can get to know me. I mean, why go about life in a capitalist society trying to maximize your money making potential? So weird, right? Yeah. Why wouldn't I use my capital to make a bunch of money? Because BASSFZZ thinks that I must be unhappy, even though I'm not. He thinks that other people must be unhappy if they're consuming porn, even though plenty of happy people consume porn. Bro, why are you so mad at me? LOL, what if I was a sub? I'm not mad at you. You're just making really bad points and I'm addressing them. If you have, I'm going to sit around, wait for you to make a couple more points if you'd like. But what if you were a sub? I don't care if you're a sub. You must not be on my live streams. I have very strict, my goal is not solely to maximize my profits. My goal is to maximize my profits while being a happy person with healthy boundaries. And if you were a sub and you were asking me these questions and not having, like, that's the thing. You're like, what's the value? And I tell you the value. You're like, well, I don't like that value. Why do you do it? You're an object. Like, you just keep trying to say things that, again, you're not making good points. And the reason that I'm addressing them is to try to address your arguments. But Jazz, you're insulting me and saying you wouldn't notice me. LOL. That's really mean. Guys, who thinks I'm being too mean? Let's take a vote. I said that because you said that you said that you see me as an object. I was saying, why would I care if I would never notice you? But that's really mean. I said those, Jazmen, not me. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna end this soon, but I said those rich men see you as an object. How do you know? Are you them? I don't even have sex with them ever. And we are on FaceTime for sometimes 3 hours a night. We go out together. They call me to talk about what's going on and my opinions on political issues, daily current events. And none of them, I don't have sex a lot, as most of you who follow me know. I haven't had sex since February. And these men, so that's what being an object means, is that people call me and ask me my opinions on things, and we talk a lot, and we go out and we have fun, go on dates. Sometimes it leads to something, sometimes it doesn't. I like hearing about what they're doing, the projects they're working on. They like hearing about this, and men like you, they're actually really interested in that. About, well, he's taking this shit too personally. He thinks I am, but really he is. So yeah, I never said I do. So then mostly these men are objects to you then. I guess you could say that as much as I'm objects to them, they may be objects to me. If that's how you want to look at things, if you just want to look at people's interactions, like who's objectifying who, go for it. Again, these are mostly thoughts that come from people who aren't even in this sphere. And I think it's almost like a coping mechanism to be like, well, they're all having fun and they're all going out on dates and living life and having intimacy and companionship, but they're just viewing each other as objects. So all right, sorry, I'm having so much fun, but I actually do have to go. I have to do my work. The person that said, am I planning to return to law in a few years? Not in a traditional way, no. Why are you generalizing? I thought generalizing was bad too. Who am I? Are you talking to me or them? Why are you generalizing? I thought generalizing was bad to you. No. This is actually, there's actually statistical evidence for this, though. That's the difference, right? We looked at, when we did the incel episode, how men who perceive themselves to not do very well in the dating arena are more likely to have these thoughts towards women. That is what I'm talking about. So it's not saying every single one, but you are it is statistically accurate to say that you are more likely to be this way if you're saying stuff like this. Why do you dislike incels so much rather than trying to help them? There's no way. I mean, I don't have a solution to try to help them, but I think I don't hate them either. If you watch my episode, you would know that. So considering you have much more power to help them than anyone, what, do you want me to fuck them? Do you want me to fuck you? Just say that. How do I have more power than anyone to help them? Because I'm a woman that puts out porn that you're saying is actually damaging to them? Yes, you could. LOL. Okay. I think we got to the bottom of this. BASSFZZ. I will not be fucking you. Sorry that makes you upset and hate life. But at the same time, I'm actually speaking to you now because I don't. Things get better. This is not the way things usually get better, but things get better. I hope you feel better because I wouldn't want to be you. Sorry. I can spend some time to go and pull up things that conclude differently. What would you do with that? Well, if you do it, send them to my DMs. First, do it. I'm not going to. If you can pull up, what would you pull up? Something that says that people like this are happier, are getting a lot of women in society and stuff? No. In fact, the men I know that are getting a bunch of things in society, when they hear about this kind of incel rhetoric, they're like, what the fuck, bro? I'm like, yeah, it's like common. Like they don't think like this, which is a privilege of theirs because they don't hate us because we are good to them and we're apparently not good to you. So that's why you think like this. You're definitely meant to be a lawyer as you're willing to argue. I love arguing. Bro, but my question is, why do you think I want you though? What? Because you are probably following me. You went on my stream. You're saying that I have the power to help incels like you. Why do you think that I could only disagree with because I secretly want to have sex with you? Straw man, I never said that. I think that you're disagreeing with me with really poor arguments, and I'm addressing every single one. I could have just blocked you forever ago, but I'm addressing this because I enjoy it. But you have like 2 minutes before I have to go. So if you have any last words, I'm giving you a platform, giving you an opportunity to talk about things. I'm not deplatforming you. Yeah, pretty presumptuous. 99.98% of guys want to fuck me, but maybe not him. I'm not saying I'm gonna make this is an assumption. I'm gonna make the assumption that BASSFZZ wants to fuck almost, like, I think if almost any woman would agree to fuck him, he would probably take that opportunity. He doesn't seem like he's getting a lot. I wouldn't want to argue with someone who's willing to read pages and pages of constitutional law. I think that's why sometimes like these chats are so, and I'm really bad at just cutting it off when it's not like beneficial anymore. I know, but I just enjoy, and I do think this rhetoric needs to be addressed. Why block you? I'm just saying, if I had no interest in actually hearing out your viewpoints, I would have done that. A lot of people would have done that, actually. I don't. But like, look at how you insulted me. You insulted me saying I won't fuck you. Why say that? You're turning yourself into an object with that. Okay. I'm just going to address this and then we're done. I said that because you were saying that I have the power to help incels, which I don't know what kind of power I would have to help them besides fucking them. And because you are the perfect prototype of an incel, I was saying I wouldn't fuck you. And shouldn't you hold yourself higher than that? I don't think that's the thing. I don't think fucking somebody is holding them in a low regard. I don't think talking about somebody in an explicit manner. I don't think about having explicit thoughts. I mean, Hazard Stint, I don't know if he's still in here. He's probably like, what the fuck, Jazmen? You should not be addressing this. But he and I are a good example of it. He subscribes to me for the sexual stuff, but we 100% see each other as individuals and all that. And I think a lot of people are like that. A lot of people are very excited for me to start my YouTube channel so I can talk about this stuff, even though, just like you, they first saw me and saw my content because of lust. So this idea that if somebody sees you in a sexual manner, that you are no longer human to them and they don't care if you live or die and you're just nothing and you're the scum, like this kind of rhetoric is very apparent in particular segments of society. It's not amongst us attractive, well-off people. We don't think like that. I'm sorry. Bass comments go over my head. Amazed you can answer them. I'm very, very talented. Would you fuck Bass if he was secretly Ryan Gosling? No, because I wouldn't fuck Ryan Gosling. She's doing a great job defending herself. What kind of stupid question was that? Okay, guys. Bass FZZ. Why are we putting her on a pedestal for what human? She's just a human being like everyone else with feelings, opinions, and desires. His point is because I post my titties online and you guys get hard, that you cannot at the same time see me as a human being. That's his point, which is flawed. And usually that kind of opinion only happens when a guy doesn't have the so he only probably has access to women in this way with pornography and stuff. So he hasn't had the ability to also see a woman sexually and also in an intimate manner outside of sex because he doesn't have those kind of opportunities. So that's why to him, he's like, well, I only see women who are posting stuff online and I get horny over them and they're objects to me. Yeah, because we don't talk to you, you know? So it makes sense. Can confirm, came for the titty, stay for the intellectual stuff. Yeah. Curious if you can speak Persian. I can. No logic, just leading questions to an end he didn't like. Exactly. And I expose that and we can let people watch. But I do like addressing this kind of stuff because of that reason. Look how you're treating me. If someone disagrees with you, you lash out. All these men compliment you because they're scared to lose your favor. Sure. I don't think I lashed out. I think I just addressed your comments and you didn't like it. This is the problem with these kind of people is they say whatever they want, right? Object, what you do has no value to society. And then I say, no, what I do does have value to society. I don't think people just see me as an object. You may see me as an object because of X and they're like, oh, you're so mean. What? I think Netherlands has a program to subsidize sex work for disabled citizens. I would say programs like that could do more for incels than Jazz herself. Yeah, I don't know if you expect me to fuck every incel in the world to help them. You make a lot of presumptions. You could just ask him if he's any of these things. You jump to conclusions about him for no reason. Wrong use of a comma. Sorry, that was just me being me. But I don't think I'm jumping. What conclusions am I jumping to? How am I jumping to conclusions more than he is? That's what I'm saying. Don't play victim, Bass. Yeah, that's what he wants to do. Exactly. Speaking fact is lashing out. Yeah, some people are going to see it that way. Some people think me speaking at all is lashing out. Me clapping back at all is lashing out. And we're going to let them think that. I'm new here and I have no favor. Well, according to him, the only way that you could agree with me and not him is if you're trying to get my favor for what exactly? I didn't offer anybody in this chat free news if they don't agree with you. Jazmen, let's use common sense. I'm not saying you should literally have sex with incels. My point is that a kinder woman can prove incels wrong. No, they can't. I don't know if you've been on an incel forum. Probably have. But they they hate all of us. They hate women in general. And the only way that they can stop hating us is if they get what they want. But the truth of the matter is, they're not attractive and desirable men to us for a reason. And usually that reason isn't because they're not 6 feet tall and built like Hercules, which is what they think. That was my whole point. If you watch that stream, is a lot of times there are underlying issues. Nobody likes nasty, hateful, borderline, homicidal, psychotic people that nobody likes them. Not just women, men, nobody. A lot of them talk about how they're home all the time. And one guy I literally read recently, because I went on the forum, said that he hears his own farts more than his voice because nobody talks to him and stuff, which again, sad predicament. But the issue isn't on women to come save these men. We can talk about what kind of things can maybe potentially help them. But one, we are not going to excuse their behavior. We're not going to excuse their rhetoric just because we feel bad for them. And three, we're not going to put it on women to come help these men. Do you think they got that way randomly, or maybe because it was rejected, used, and being hurt? That's not a justification. I don't care if you were rejected, used, and being hurt, right? This is a comment. This is what Kanye West is fucking saying. Well, Jewish people hurt me, so now I can hurt them. No, you can't. That's not how it works. You can, but everybody's going to fucking hate you. You're like, that's not how the world works. You don't get to, because you've been bullied or hurt, now turn around and go shoot up a school, or, sit online and just spew out hate, wanting women to die and all this stuff. I'm not saying that's what you want, but when you're saying, why do you think they became this way? I don't care. That doesn't justify what they're doing. I lack social skills and cues. Like, if you're set with them for getting this point, but not looking at how they got there. I can be sympathetic for how they got there, but that doesn't justify their actions. I mean, look at Jeffrey Dahmer. He may have a fucking condition. Some serial killers, their brains are wired differently, and they've had really traumatic childhoods. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be like, well, go kill people. Like, that's not how it works. So you think all or most incels are just hateful men to start? Not that they develop a higher tier of social awkwardness. No, I do think that's completely true. I completely think it's true that is how. I'm not saying that everything was fair to them. I'm not saying that they weren't very unlucky in a number of ways. However, that does not justify hatred. That doesn't mean that I need to justify, or I need to not push back against their hateful rhetoric towards women, towards me, towards society, towards my other followers. That's the one thing I will not tolerate. If somebody's giving me a compliment and you comment under, beta simp, she doesn't care about you, she only wants to chat. Now, because you're fucking crazy, you're trying to insult an innocent guy who's just not as miserable as you, commenting on my pic, and I'm supposed to be like, well, you were bullied as a child. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you were bullied as a child, but it doesn't excuse your behavior. I spent a great deal of time talking to incels both on forums and on Discord. Most of them don't actually hate women or want them to do them any harm. Also, the idea that women don't reject based on looks and other superficial characteristics is ridiculous. I'm not saying that women don't care about looks, but the incel community studies have shown repeatedly overemphasize the physical over other attributes. They assume that every woman wants somebody that's where we see how many, you guys, this is just out, like, how many times do you see an ugly guy with a really hot girl, or a girl at all? Things with these incels. So I'm not saying all of them hate women, but if you go on incels.is right now and you go through, in fact, if you say anything nice about women, it's called white knighting and you get kicked off. So maybe I'm looking at an extreme forum, but we cannot pretend that this kind of rhetoric and this kind of disdain for women, especially OnlyFans girls, is not a common theme amongst these people. Honestly, Jazmen, most incels want to be loved by women. Go for it. But see, that doesn't mean that you get to come on my stream and start calling me an object and calling me this and that, and I'm supposed to just not say anything back to you, or else it's mean. go be lonely in your own corner. There's nothing I can do about it. I do my best to talk about these issues, talk about ways that maybe we can potentially combat it. I've talked to other men about this who are very not incels, and they're like, I don't know, maybe they need better male figures in their life. I talked to a guy the other day that's pretty does well with women, and you know, there's a lot of them, they all have different solutions, but none of them are like, you women should go be, you should be nicer to them. I've never heard that from a normal guy. The ugly guy thing isn't often. Also, sometimes women are with those men just because they want their money, not love. The ugly guy thing isn't often? What do you mean? So because according to incels, women all want the top 10% of men. That's what their whole, like, that's what their whole thing is about. So when you are saying that sometimes they want men, so you're saying that only the top 10% of men have women ever? That 90% of men are incels? That's not true. I'm literally saying that men who want you as arm candy and parade you around are using you as an object. But that's, who are these men? Who's using me as arm candy and parading me around? You are just making that assumption as soon as I said that I have a lot of great interactions with very successful men. You're like, well, they're just using you. You're making that assumption. There are all kinds of relationships with two people decide to be together for is their reason. If a man believes that what you do on Twitch has diminished meaning, or that the men who orbit you are being misled, what does that mean? He's an incel? He can't just have an opinion without being one? I don't know for sure if he's an incel. However, this isn't like, you know, a court of law like evidence, but usually the type of people that say these kinds of things are more likely, that is statistically accurate, more likely to be in this community. None of them ask women to actually contribute in assisting men. Men have to change for women. Men have to change for their own sake. Okay, sorry, that comment went away. I don't know what it said. I mean, we can't act like some guys don't reject certain women because they don't meet the beauty standards the guys are looking for. Yeah. How many of these men you went out with wanted long-term relations with you? Literally every single one. Literally, my biggest issue, I'm not just saying this, my biggest issue with dating is that these men want, especially in my age now, I'm 27. A lot of the men I talk to are 33, 34, 32. They are at the stage in their life where they want to settle down, and I don't. I literally don't. That's why we don't work out. In fact, there was the last guy, and I almost regret this because he was fucking perfect. He was perfect. I liked being around him, everything. But this man was like, I only want this if you want a long-term relationship, and I don't want a long-term relationship right now. So I'm having the opposite problem. And maybe this isn't what you want to hear, but this is the truth. A lot of men don't have an issue with what I do online. A lot of men find value in me past the way I look. If this upsets you, I'm sorry, but this is just what it is. And I have to friend zone a lot of people that actually want relationships with me, or I have to try to be like, well, why don't we just have fun? And they're like, no, I'm too old. I want to settle down. I honestly feel like your head is gassed up by a bunch of men with desire for you, and I don't think you really respect men as people. Okay, that's apparently I'm making assumptions, but that's your assumption. Great. Can't blame a man for wanting to lock someone like you down. Thank you. I'm telling you this as a man, but okay. I understand you're a man, but I don't think you could be any different from the type of men I engage with in real life. And most of the men I engage with online, no offense. Like, for instance, you and Hazard Stint are completely different kinds of men. So when you're saying you're telling me this as a man, I'm going to be a little rude here. You're not a true man to me. Not because of the way you look, but because real men to me do not behave like this or think like this. Okay, I'm just going to read to the end of this. I'm telling you this from personal experience. You and me have completely different personal experiences, though, baby. You and me could not be more separate in our personal experiences. So your personal experience can dictate your life, and my personal experiences can dictate mine. I'm not here trying to tell you how to live your life based on my personal experiences. I'm not in your chat. Most successful and wealthy men want a wife with a law degree. Her intellect is her value, not her OF. I have men that don't care about either. They don't care that I'm a lawyer, and they don't care that I have an OnlyFans. They just like me. None of the men you talk to about incels ask women to actually contribute in assisting men. We're in a situation where men have to change for women, men have to change for their own sake, but women are never have to change their behavior to help men. I don't know what that means. Yes, and men respect you enough to be honest. What? You're not a real man to me, sorry. All right. I think I'm gonna end this stream. Okay, first I'm gonna read this. You have some serious generalizations about incels that are not accurate. They are not all this hyper. They're not maybe all this hyper. That's why I didn't say all of them are like shooting people, because some of them are. Also, this is not a representation of anything real. That form is full of foolhardy teenage boys who go out of their way to be over their top. You need to speak to people like you are doing now. Get a sense of these things. Appreciate the community. Well, I mean, go on the forum, guys. These aren't teenage boys. A lot of them actually talk about how they're in their 30s, 40s, etc., and they're incels. This is the best way to understand this community, by going into their own community, where there's the incel headquarters for me to go and talk to them. You guys probably are able to talk to more of them because you're in that community. I'm not in that community, so my best representation of that community is research that is done on the community online, which I presented in the thing, and their own community, right? There's been polls on their own community. How many of you guys deal with suicidal thoughts? And a bunch of them, like, if there is a incel light community somewhere, send me the link and I'll go read what they're writing over there. Thank you for this chat, Jazz. You've held an excellent debate despite a few inferior opponents. Thank you, Hazard Stint. Sorry, I know Hazard Stint is like here for like actually learning, and then I just derail onto like this has been a mind gym, Jazz. You've thank you. To fight these keyboard kings. Hold on, what's a true man to you? All we've done is disagree. A true man to me isn't somebody that you saying your personal experience, when I know your personal experience is not at all similar to mine, shows me you don't hang around in my kind. And this isn't me saying like for instance, I would consider Hazard Stint a man, and if I wasn't online, I probably would have never met him. I probably would have never met Terry. But these people, they aren't showing me. To me, men, like a good characterization of a man is somebody who is strong and somebody who is not weak. And to me, everything, and it's not because you disagreed, it's because you have this like insistence on telling me that other men are seeing me in this way because you're a man, and I'm just trying to tell you you're a different kind of man than a lot of the men that actually see me and are actually in my life. And every assumption you've made about me, like, oh, these men don't want real relationships with you and all these things, are wrong. So that's what I'm saying. You're not the kind of man. So when you're saying I'm telling you this is a man, if I was to say, oh, as a man, you're not the man I would go to. That's all I'm saying. Would you be open to a debate? I would be open to a debate. Maybe you should just enjoy the conversation. Stop being Juno. This is silly. She's never going to choose you. Let's all give Jazz some love and drown out the haters. Don't worry about the haters, guys. I enjoy haters. Jasmine, let's have a formal chat. We can talk like adults and equals. Maybe typing is awful. I'm trying to say we have actual. I've given you plenty of time on my platform. I have to go do things. Maybe this is a little mean, but I have a lot of men I have to attend to. I know you probably don't have a lot of women, but if you want to slide in my Instagram DMs and make an actual point, I'll address the point. But nothing in this chat has been intellectually stimulating that you have said. I think Bass's opinion would have been different if the same conversation about the male content creator. 100% his opinion would have been different if it was a male content creator. And that's really obvious, but I've still given every single one of his comments some traction, and we'll let the crowd decide. So, I will say, based on my personal opinion, I don't think you're very happy, even though you're trying to say that everybody that watches porn or makes porn is unhappy. I'm very happy. I know some other people that consume porn that are very happy. Sorry if that's your experience. And I hope you feel better, and maybe you can work really hard and stay strong through No Nut November so you can maybe be happier and not consume my content. We should talk to each other for real. I'm willing to pay you. No, now you're getting creepy. I don't want you to pay to talk to me. There are a lot of weak men in this chat. Real men have standards, and these standards mean they are just themselves and others. There are a lot of... What? Does that make sense to anybody? Only fake men accept all things. Who is accepting all things? And these standards mean what? Okay. I have no idea what cohort is dead is trying to say. But I think I'm going to end this. To all the men that are struggling in this chat, feel better. To all the men that are struggling in this chat but aren't using it or aren't coping with it in unhealthy ways towards others, you're a real one. And all the men who aren't struggling, have a wonderful evening. Bye.